It was funny listening to people say, "Oh, we want to do the NX7 against the NZ7." I'm like, dude, you're doing it. You just don't know you're doing it.
Overall, some of the rounds were a lot closer than I kind of anticipated. I expected to have night and day differences all around, and then sometimes I'm thinking, wait, guys, I need to actually have an image paused for me to be able to discern a difference and be able to write some notes down and say what I think I prefer.
And it was really pretty cool. I think it was nice to get objective opinions so people couldn't form bias against or for particular projectors.
As one person even said, the lowest cost projector, they would not have even spent $2,000 to go all the way up to the RS 3100. And we kind of looked at it like, wow, that's a statement.
Sure.
To basically say the $1,000 projector, they wouldn't even spend $2,000 more to get the performance difference that projector and the RS 3100 was providing.
And after the shootout, we were sitting down here and we noticed, doing some more comparisons, that the NX series, at least with the NX7, it's got some shortcomings. Next time we're going to shoot a Christy Griffin on a 120-inch screen. That's what we're going to do, and light the screen on fire.
The right one, I thought the brightness was a little bit brighter, and then the sharpness was a little bit better for me on the one on the right.
Hey, aren't you that YouTuber?
Be sure to subscribe and like.
Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Youthman. I am super pumped. I just came back from a 2022 Projector Shootout in Kansas City. Man, we had an absolute blast. We paired 8 projectors ranging from $1,200 all the way up to $15,000. Put them head to head. We did a variety of different kind of testing, and the participants that were involved in the exercise, they were not blindfolded, but they were looking at it blind, meaning they did not know which projectors were being shown. And so we tried to provide as much objective testing as we could to declare a winner. In this video, we're going to talk about all the things that we learned from that event. It took about probably 8 to 10 hours to do the testing and to do the shootout. And so afterward, I sat down with about 7 guys and we just kind of debriefed. What did we learn from this? What things surprised us? What things did we kind of assume that were going to happen, that did happen? And what were the big takeaways from that? And so hopefully, if you're looking for a projector, I think you'll find a lot of value in what we discovered in this video. Now, before we get into the video, I want to give a huge thank you to Monoprice, who provided all of the HDMI cables, the 48 gigabit cables for the shootout, as well as a video switcher. That made things super helpful, and it made sure that all projectors were playing on the same playing field. And I also want to give a big thank you to Elite Screens for providing a pair of 100-inch screens that we could use for the shootout. That way we could have 2 images side by side on the exact same screen to make it much easier for the competition. And for also making this video possible by sponsoring this video. Elite Screens offers a wide variety of cinema quality projection screens while focusing on providing them at an affordable price. Whether you need a CLR screen for your ultra short throw projector, a tab tension electronic drop-down screen for your living room, or maybe a massive 180-inch acoustic transparent screen that you can place your speakers behind, or even an outdoor screen for your outdoor living area. Regardless of your projection screen needs, Elite Screens has got you covered. You can visit their website at elitescreens.com. I'll have links for it down in the description below. All right, guys, we're up here in Kansas City. We've had an incredible day with a bunch of great dudes. A lot of them have already left, but we thought it'd be really cool to just kind of get around and really just have a conversation over what took place today. We started about 6 a.m. this morning, and it's now a little bit after midnight when we finished up. But we've had some incredible experiences. We had 8 projectors that we were kind of going head to head. We did a lot of testing. And so I just want to kind of pick your brains, talk about the different projectors that we tested, maybe some of the reasons why we did certain things, how we set it up, and just overall impressions of the day and maybe what we learned together. So I'm going to let you guys just go ahead and start off kind of Share about the day and just whatever aspect of it that kind of stood out to you. Maybe there's some things that we thought were going to happen, but they didn't, or some things that surprised you. So give me your thoughts. Well, all right, so you got here 2 days in advance to set everything up. We've got 8 projectors here, ranging anywhere from $1,200 to $25,000.
I think we had 9 projectors total.
Well,
But it wasn't.
We didn't put it in the shootout, but
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
did
so
have people did go in and they did check it out. They fell in love with the picture. So I mean,
Sure.
we did have it here, but I don't think it would have worked very well on a 100-inch screen.
Yeah.
It didn't
So-
make a lot of sense.
At least kind of talk about the setup as far as what we've got here. We've got 4 projectors on the left, 4 projectors on the right. Tell me what we got, what we're looking at right here.
NZ7 or RS 2100, the new JVC laser. Epson 5060, Epson 3800, and JVC RS 420.
Nice.
No, it wasn't a 50-60, it's a 60-50.
And then Jonathan, what do we got over here, man?
This is the champion, the expected champion. It's a Optoma 50S. It's a Sony 295 ES. A JVC NX7.
NX7.
JVC NX8 with the
NZ8
titanium metal plate.
Ooh, I like that, dude.
But
But right here you can see we've got some velvet, and so that kind of separates the 2 screens. But we had 4 there, and we could easily switch between each projector and kind of do some head-to-head competition. I got what's going on here.
Michael's being
It's
assaulted by the
attacking me,
velvet.
man. It's attacking me.
I like you.
So, Nick, you spent many hours, and crazy. This is a big feat, man. I mean, you're trying to calibrate 8 projectors really in a day period, and that's pretty daunting. But you were up till 3 a.m. this morning. Then you were continually tweaking stuff. So just kind of tell us a little bit at least what that looked like. Maybe not step by step, but some of the things that you wanted to make sure that you thought would help make this whole shootout as even as we could. And there were certain decisions that you made and Tony made, and each one of you kind of collectively, why do we make those decisions?
So yeah, I came like a day and a half early. I knew that with 8 projectors it would take quite a long time to calibrate them. But you know, a lot of times when you haven't done something like this before, you kind of underestimate the amount of work that needs to be done. I've been doing calibration for a number of years, about 3 years now, and I know that no one else in this kind of group hasn't really done any calibration, and I wanted to try and help make this comparison as fair as possible, or as useful as possible, and I know that calibration would help that a lot. So when I do a calibration for a projector, I mean, normally you'd spend 3 days, like at least 5 hours on a single projector. And here we had about maybe an hour per projector. I mean, you think 8 hours, 8 projectors, like it's difficult to get a good result, but I think we did a good job, getting a pretty good result.
Yeah.
We had to make many considerations. Do we calibrate them all to a similar brightness? Do we calibrate them all at their maximum brightness? There's lots of different considerations, and maybe some people might have some other, reasons to share as to why we did things like that.
So we started off kind of the bracket with having all 8 projectors at what, like the lowest common denominator? Is that what you call that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
So
which
of
was
the
which one?
projectors, there was the Sony 295 ES had the lowest brightness, so we just matched all the projectors to that one.
Sure.
I think it's important to say that not all the bulbs or projectors were brand new. So they
Correct.
they were donated from different people for this shootout.
Yeah.
So bulbs had varying numbers of hours. They weren't all fresh out of the box. So that's something that we had to take in consideration. And the 295 ES was as Tony said, the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
At least for that test.
And
Sure.
how many hours did that have on it? Like 1,700?
It had quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was outputting about 1,000 lumens.
Okay.
It's supposed to be 1,500 new
Yeah.
Sure.
in bright mode, but
Right.
yeah.
And so, and again, I mean, we don't have, I mean, some of these were brand new. The NZ series, of course, those are all brand new. Those are laser projectors. But then we've got some that people were just around this area said, hey, I've got this projector. I'd love to just bring it. Let's just see how they compare. I know some of you were thinking, why in the world would you take a $1,200 projector and put it up against a $15,000 projector? That seems kind of not like a really good comparison. Honestly, we just did it because we could. I mean, that's what we had available, and I do that a lot of times with subwoofers. You wonder, why did I compare this one to this one? It's because what I had at the moment. So we don't have the luxury of getting 8 brand new projectors. I mean, we asked a bunch of people, hey, if you've got a Sony, a higher end Sony, we'd love to pair it up with the new JVCs. Let's see how they compare. We just didn't have somebody step up to the plate and say, yeah, I'd be glad to bring one. So we had these projectors. And so we ran several brackets, which Ryan kind of set those up and kind of walked through the process of what we actually did through that bracketing.
Sure. So we had 2 brackets. Well, we did 2 brackets, but we had 2 sets of 4. So the projectors we actually had were the, what did we have?
Optima 50.
The Optima 50X or X50, I think it was, the JVC RS420, the Epson 3800, the Epson 6050, the Sony 295 ES, the NX7, the NZ8, and the NZ7. And we also had an NZ9 here, but it wasn't in the bracket,
Right.
just because it didn't make a lot of sense to compare something like this. People saw it in the theater, but they didn't see it directly compared. So the brackets, people didn't know at the time, but we were trying to not move things, so we weren't having to refocus and reshift lenses and stuff like that. So the brackets were set up to have projectors from the right side compete against brackets from the left side, and it ended up working out fairly well until we had one anomaly that really, we can talk about that a little bit later, that didn't go how we really thought it was going to go, but I think that's really pertinent to the conversation. I think that shed a lot of light on, and Jonathan brought up what that actually we thought it caused, and I think a lot of us will agree with him on what that was. But that's how everything laid out. It was single elimination. So we had 4 rounds at the beginning. That went down to 2. Then we had a round of 1. So we had level matched, and then we had a winner. And then the next round was full open. So brightness, because a lot of people people had different opinions. Some people wanted them level matched. Some people wanted them full open for the color and all that. And so we did it both ways.
Yeah.
And we had some interesting results in some of them.
So round 3, so this was the final round. Who thinks the one on the right was the winner?
Wow, it's unanimous.
Wow!
What?
Why?
See, I thought I was
It was
just
the
being.
closest one yet, and it's unanimous.
Holy sh! Who thinks the one on the left won? Wow!
So I know, like, several of you are way, way, way more knowledgeable in video, like big time. I mean, you're really deep into this. I know myself, we're basically kind of on the average consumer, I would say. We don't get into Mad VR, we don't get into color calibration and all that. And so, to me, having all of the projectors at a lower lamp mode kind of put some of them at a disadvantage, but I see why we did that. Because the original, what was it, like the Optima. I'm not sure the Optima really stands a chance against a $25,000 or $15,000 projector.
I know what you're talking about. It was
But-
best here.
But it did surprise us, and
It
we'll
did.
talk about that a little bit. So that was kind of cool. But I know we were just trying to make it even, but I'm really glad that later on we did open them wide open. It's like, look, let's see what they can do just at their full potential, and let's just see what we like. And I think there were some great observations. So we tried to do it just as best as we could with the resources we had. And the biggest thing, we had a whole lot of fun, man. This was a blast, and it was a lot of work. So Ryan, thanks for putting this together, and Jonathan.
It was a lot of fun.
And Nick, y'all have countless hours in this. I know you guys, you look at it and it's easy for us to critique and go, well, I can't believe you didn't do that, or why didn't this, it is what it is. This is what you chose to do.
It's easy to talk the talk. It's a lot more difficult to actually walk the walk. And you got to make considerations, like Nick said, that would everybody make those considerations?
Right.
I mean, we already saw a lot of conversation about, I can't believe you have the white ceiling and the carpet and the walls. And man, I can't just throw unlimited money at these problems.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is the house that we live in, so there were certain considerations that we could make or had to make. So it is what it is. And I think we drew some pretty interesting conclusions that are going to help people.
Well, and I don't think there was any difficulty telling differences.
No.
between the
Well,
some of them. Well, let's talk
there
about
were
that.
some that were very close, but that was
Because they're naturally very close.
Yes, yes.
But I'm saying, like, you know, if somebody's saying, well, you're not really going to see the benefits, or that's not true. We saw the differences.
Sure.
It was fairly evident.
You're still going to see the issue, the benefits.
Many of the bracket winners were like almost universal. 70 is like a kind of low percentage.
Now, what was the
90%,
lumen
100%.
level for the match?
So it was about 100 nits.
105. I think
105 nits.
That was what the
level
Sony
match.
put out.
That was what the Sony
Right.
could put out on a 100-inch screen.
Now, am I correct in saying that after the first round, so Sony, we level matched there. After the first round, we level matched to the next lowest. Is that what we did?
In this,
Yes.
I think we did on the
when
second
we start
one.
in the second.
Second-
Once we
Second-
once
so the
we
second
eliminated the Sony out of the equation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we started level matching to whatever the lowest common denominator was
Of that next
those
bracket.
brackets.
Yeah.
And then after
So
that,
they did progressively get a little bit brighter.
yeah.
Right.
So, but yes, we always made sure that it was always level matched.
Now, was that
we
the
kept-
correct decision? Should we have stayed lower?
Yeah.
I mean, that's hindsight's always 2020. You can always look back and be like, man, we shouldn't have done that, but it made the most sense.
I
in
think
the
it was
heat of the
good though.
moment.
Like I said, we did it both ways. We did a bracket of lowest common denominator, but then at the end we're like, let's just crank them wide open. Let's put the Tesla Plaid up against the Tesla Model S, and let's just see how it rolls. And one of them rolled pretty fast.
When was that? When was that test?
Hey,
I missed that one.
that's coming tomorrow. That's coming
Okay.
tomorrow. So let's talk
Must be
about
showing
like
up in my driveway tomorrow.
I would love to have some conversation. Number one, about what did we notice? Like, what did you see? Even what surprised you? I know we had probably about 15 people in here,
There's a lot of
and
surprises.
yeah,
There's a
it
lot of
was-
surprises.
Yeah, so it was like
I
I
think
think
we-
we all came in having certain expectations.
I think we
of-
take this heat by heat.
Okay.
So, like our first 4 matches, we talk about that. Then
Okay.
the next 2, then the final, and then
All
go
right.
through it.
So
that
the
way.
first heat.
So I
of
can,
course,
I can
we got,
tell you guys what the heat is, and I think we're going to outline this, or I'm going to post something, or one of us will on AVS, and there'll be a bracket
sure.
that
I'll
you
put
guys
a
can
link
see.
down in the description to that.
All right. So, do we want to talk about the material first?
Sure.
Because we
Sure.
used 3 movies pretty consistently
Sure.
through a lot of this.
Yeah. Well, even Tony could probably cover
Talk
the
about
material.
why.
Yeah, he was mostly running.
Well, I mean, we wanted to cover basically bright, like something that had a bright scene with a lot of color. We also wanted to test different things that had darker scenes, because the problem is if you test just one type of scene, you're not going to get the, you know, the full envelope of what the projector's capable of.
Sure.
So you really have to test a wide variety of scenes, from something that's really bright, something that's not so bright, to something that's almost extremely dark. And when I say extremely dark, I'm not talking like Tron, because even Tron has like the neon lights will immediately throw off your eyes. So you need something that almost has nothing lit up in the scene at all,
Sure.
and it's just all shadow details, and where the irises can basically close almost all the way down, if not all the way.
Yeah.
So I mean, it really helps to. I mean, and I hate, you know, basically, bottom line is most of the winners were decided by which could produce the best black scenes.
Yeah.
Is the bottom line, because a lot of the times people are looking at the bright scenes and be like, well, these projectors are
Pretty close.
pretty
Yeah.
close.
I mean, and I'm not the videophile, any of these experts. I felt that the black levels were a fair amount better on the left side. Sure. And so that's my big difference.
The first round and the second round, the left, I would say, would be, and this is my opinion, the clear winner. I do favor great blacks.
I've had a couple of these experiences where we've done stuff like this, but I would say the challenging part is going to be happening a few hours from now when you're just trying to keep the same level of objectivity up for this kind of stuff. But I'm seeing some stuff already that I somewhat expected. The biggest one being what affects my perception of sharpness is actually the contrast, especially beyond a certain distance. These screens that we're looking at here, they're about 100 inches, and I'm pretty close to them. I'd say about 7.5, 8 feet back. And already, you know, it's really tough to tell stuff like screen door and stuff like that. But like the contrast differences and how much that affects that perceived sharpness is what's affecting my opinion at this point. Round one, round one left, round 2 left were the clear winners for me for that reason, where when you have those better blacks, it makes that perception of sharpness go up, and it makes that saturation go up as well. So yeah, so far so good. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that really surprised me is because we didn't know. We were sitting in the front. You guys were switching in the back. And we didn't know which ones were being
Well, we actually
projected.
sent you out of the room for
Yeah,
a lot of that.
that's true. We did switch that up, and that helped.
Well, it's really important to know that this was a blind test. Like, none of the people doing it knew which projectors were actually going.
Yeah, I had no idea. Other than, okay, I know there's 4 projectors over here, but I didn't know what models, and then I knew there was 4 projectors over here. Yep. But we didn't know what order y'all were going to put them in. But it was kind of interesting to me to see how similar a lot of these were. And I guess I thought that there would be vast differences. You know, when you go from an NZ7 to an NZ8, okay, there's $5,000 difference there, right?
Yeah.
Am I going to see $5,000 of difference? And
well, the caveat there is it was a 100-inch screen.
Correct. And I guess that's the other thing. So we did have these screens, you know, sponsored or whatever you want to call it, donated from Elite Screens. And so, you know, would it have been different on a 150-inch screen? Probably so.
It most certainly would have.
Oh, that would have drastically changed.
Yeah, some of those couldn't have hung at all at the beginning. They would have just been wiped out like, okay, that's garbage, because it really can't produce that amount of light.
I think Mad VR made them a lot more similar than different.
It did.
Too.
Okay.
Because Mad VR basically leveled the playing field for the cheaper projectors.
Gotcha.
If you would have plugged a straight HDR 60 hertz signal in there out of your Blu-ray player, some of those cheaper options would have just looked like a muddy mess.
Right, sure.
And they wouldn't have held a candle, and they did hold a candle to some of the more expensive options because of Mad VR.
Right.
Okay, so the reason why we decided to do that is because we figured most people are going to have like a Panasonic player that can do the tone mapping. If you have a JVC, you know, they have excellent tone mapping, so you can just run any streaming services or Blu-ray into it, and it's going to, or, you know, UHD into it, and it's going to do a great job. But the weaker ones, the tone mapping is pretty horrible on a lot of those. So we figured the people that are going to have those types of projectors are also going to go out and buy a Panasonic that actually has decent tone mapping, and they can turn that on. So regardless that we used Mad VR, you could have just used a Panasonic UHD player and turn the tone mapping on inside the UHD player, and it still would have made an even playing field for all the projectors.
Sure, and so why is it horrible? Because some of the viewers may not even understand. What happens with UHD discs that would make a cheap projector look bad? It's that it makes it muddy. It takes
well, basically what happens is if it doesn't, okay, so the problem is the software is leap years greater than the display technologies that we have. So what they need to do is take all the luminance values and try to compress it into, let's say, most of these projectors may be only able to hit 100 nit.
But the content is mastered at a nit level.
But yeah, so it's like anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000, and some are even up to 10,000. So you got to take 10,000, what essentially would be 10,000 nits, and compress it all the way down into 100 nit. And some of the algorithms that some of these cheaper projectors use are they just don't work, and it just turns into basically washed out.
Right.
And
it's just too dim. It's not enjoyable.
Yeah, it's too dim. You colors kind of washed out. The brights are washed out. The blacks are washed out. So you have to. I mean, we could have done the same kind of test with standard Blu-ray if we wanted to.
Yeah.
But then you're not taking advantage of any of the BT 2020 color. You're not taking advantage of 4K. So we wanted to take advantage as much of the projector as we could.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that maybe surprised you during this whole shootout?
I think Brandon and Grant should weigh in on that one.
Go ahead.
I mean, they were the blind ones that did all this.
Is it Brian?
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah, so for me, obviously, I haven't seen a whole bunch of projectors. I'm definitely new to this.
Yeah.
I actually just kind of met some of these guys in the group about a month ago. I actually reached out to Jonathan about some cinema equipment that he got in the past, and he mentioned, hey, you should check out this group, and kind of invited me in. And then Ryan invited me over for the first hosted party, so I appreciate that. But so I'm kind of new to the game, I guess. I don't know near as much as a lot of the other guys do.
I'm with you, man.
They were kind of pointing out a lot of different things, and I didn't see them myself because I just am not knowledgeable and can point those things out.
Sure.
The things that stood out to me the most was the black levels. I could really see those. Yeah. And I could see which one kind of had the brighter looking screen. Mm-hmm. So I could tell, looking back now that I know the results, a lot of times I picked the JVCs. The Epson I really liked too because of the brightness. But what did surprise me also was just kind of, if you have kind of a smaller budget, it's not something to be shy about, because even some of the lower budget friendly ones even performed really well.
Right.
in some aspects. So that was pretty eye-opening too, you know. So if you're watching, you only have, you know, a $2,000 budget, you can go out there and get an Optoma, and it'll be fine for you. It's not going to be a $10,000 projector, right? But it'll be fine for your budget.
We even had a comment today that was really surprising to a lot of us. Is one person even said the lowest cost projector, they would not have even spent $2,000 to go all the way up to the RS 3100. And we kind of looked at it like, wow, that's a statement.
Sure.
To basically say the $1,000 projector, they wouldn't even spend $2,000 more to get the performance difference that projector and the RS 3100 was providing.
So it's kind of the law of diminishing returns. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with wanting something that performs better. You just have to figure out, is it worth that to you? And to each one of us, those things are worth more than others. Some of us would pay to have a brighter screen or brighter image. Some of us are looking for that deep, you know, just those rich blacks. So you kind of have to figure out like what's important to you. And what I found interesting too is that some projectors excelled at one thing, but they didn't excel at another thing. So that was kind of interesting too, is that there wasn't like a perfect projector. It was like, okay, really like the way this does this one does okay there. So, you know.
I think that was most pronounced perhaps with the Epson 3800, because when I was playing against one of the JVCs, I believe it was, I heard multiple people in the audience saying like, I like the one on the right, and it was that Epson 3800, which is a $1,700 projector or something. And they played a couple scenes over there, and people were like, "That's excellent." And then it went to a dark scene, and
that was like
multiple people say, "I switched my vote,"
or they just say, "Oh."
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Like I said, it was basically the dark scenes that really shifted the votes fairly quickly.
Now, something else that did shift the votes, I think, was color temperature too, because they weren't. Nick didn't have a huge amount of time, so there were minute differences in the colors, and that was something that I started noticing, and we really took notice of at the very end. Was color temperature was playing a role in how people were perceiving things.
Was it though, or was it the blacks? Because Jonathan asked why people chose. Because we had one of the results. Okay, the RS 2100 and RS 3100. It was literally everyone preferred the 3100.
Universally.
100%. And Jonathan's like, well, and everyone kept saying that they looked so like they put them down, and everyone's like, they look identical. We can't tell a difference.
Right.
And Jonathan's like, well, then how did they come out with 10-0? Nothing like that ever happens. If they look identical, how can 10 people say one looked better? And basically every single one of them said it was just the fraction of it, the black levels beat ever so slightly better on that dark scene, and that was the deciding factor.
Versus the first round, the second round was way closer, but I didn't have too much trouble deciding that I was going to pick the one of the slightly better blacks. It was the easiest. It's the easiest way to make that kind of decision because it affects everything else as far as perception. It's like if you're not careful, you get indoctrinated into the cult of black levels. But here I am. So, but yeah, round two, I'd pick the left.
The reason I said color temperature is because I think even with that Epson 3800, it was skewing towards the cooler side, and I think I remember people liking that more because the JVCs I think were pushing more towards warm, and we noticed that the group, for whatever reason, liked the cooler side of the spectrum. That's the only reason I bring that up.
But your group also has a lot of Epsons in your group.
Yeah.
So it's the picture they're used to seeing.
Oh, for sure. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just it was an interesting thing to take.
So ultimately,
to take into account.
it's what they're used to. So they're like, oh, okay, well, they're kind of gravitate towards what they're used to. And yeah, when you calibrate a JVC, especially when it's D6500, if you're used to a more like 7,000 Kelvin image, you're gonna be like, well, I like that because it takes a little bit of time to get used to a warmer image.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste.
Yeah, it's not
What
quite
about
like
you,
coffee,
Grant?
but
I would echo a lot of the stuff that Brian said. I think he nailed it. I was the other guy here that was blinded. I came in during like round 5, and overall, some of the rounds were a lot closer than I kind of anticipated. I expected to have night and day differences all around, and then sometimes I'm thinking, wait, guys, I need to actually have an image paused for me to be able to discern a difference and be able to write some notes down and say what I think I prefer. And just before I forget, one of the things you're talking about with the Epson and being a cooler temperature is true. And when we were unleashing the brightness on all the projectors, it was, it's bright. It has a bright image, but it also had this definitely like a bluer. We used the Art of Flight quite a few times for that, and the snow was kind of like, it's definitely a bluer tint to it on some of those, with some of the Epsons, and that was kind of like a little bit obvious. And when you first just looking at that image, and this bright thing is staring you in the face, and you kind of know, we were primed to know that was like, okay, now brightness unleashed, which one's brighter? Well, a lot of people kind of gravitated to that, I think, like immediately, instead of saying like, wait a second, this is brighter, but this other one, it's actually more accurate. And if you give them some more time, maybe they would, change their minds. And some people did. And a lot of times they would be like, oh, the brightness is great. And then we get to the Blade Runner or It, and you're like, oh, ouch. That just like,
it was funny listening to that.
Yeah, they think they got it figured out, and then it's like,
and then it's
oh.
like,
I don't think we finished talking about the material that we used. So
yeah,
we
what were the clips?
We basically used Shang-Chi from Disney, because that's relative near the end of the movie. It's got a lot of bright elements.
Sure.
A lot of HDR effects with like the glowing staffs and shields. And then from there we would go to usually Blade Runner 2049 when they first walk into, what's the scene called?
Archive.
They go down into an archive and they first open this door, and it's almost a pure black scene. And if you pause it right as they open the doors, the black levels on these projectors were evidently different.
Sure.
Okay, now this black levels looks amazing, and you see the detail.
The shadow detail is not crushed whatsoever.
And then from there, we would play that scene for a little bit, because then that goes into some brighter scenes within that same archive scene. We would play Lucy near the beginning, where she walks into the hotel, basically. And then we also did the basement scene of It. That's near the beginning of the movie. So when he goes downstairs, because there's almost no bright elements on screen, so like being able to see all the items in the basement, if your blacks aren't very good, you're not going to be, there won't be any definition to any of that stuff. It'll just be like washed out. It'll be very flat. Yeah. So as you get the higher end projectors with the better blacks and the better shadow detail, yes, it's still a dark scene, but you can actually see depth within the scene. You can actually see that, okay, well, that's a ladder. There's a jacket hanging on the door over there. There's, detergent hang on the shelf. You can actually see the bricks in the back wall. And again, if you don't have a high contrast projector, that's just it's gonna look just basically washed out completely, and you won't even realize there's certain items even in the scene that you just can't see.
Yeah, I remember twice during the shootout, and this is something that I kind of learned through this, is I think Jonathan noticed, is like, something's not right. And because he knows a lot of these projectors, he's like, something's not right. So after we finished, we went into the other room, and y'all tweaked the setting. You're like, hey, can y'all come back in here? We're going to redo that one. We just want to see if you see a difference. And it was like most of us swapped our decision. We thought we liked this one because this one was weak in this area.
I don't know if it swapped it, but it
swayed some
of
the
decisions. It wasn't that it was weak, it was misbehaving.
Right, so maybe kind of walk through that, like what was, and I guess the point of that is that sometimes there was one setting that you changed that really drastically changed the image quality. And so I know, like at home, if you've got a projector, you might not have it set up right. Now, I'm not saying that you have to get a professional calibrator, but I think it's important that you learn some of this stuff. Hang out with guys like these that know more than you do. If we don't know, guess what? These dudes do. And so hang out with them, learn from a community, but kind of talk through that, because I know that y'all made a change and it was like, whoa, there's a bigger difference there.
So in that instance, we were doing one of the Epsons, and we used Mad VR, as we've been telling you. We mapped HDR to SDR, but we kept the BT 2020 color field.
Yeah, so basically, correct. You're basically keeping, it's SDR 2020 is the output. BT 2020.
So in this instance, the Epsons don't automatically switch to that BT 2020. They stay in Rec 709. And so what was happening is they were actually kind of like, it was just watered down. It wasn't the right shading of colors. And so, you know, it was kind of a real clear preference for one projector. It was kind of like, nah, that's an easy one.
Yeah.
But I was familiar with that line because it's similar to the one I have at home, not the exact same one. And I'd watched that clip before, so it's just a familiarity thing. Saying that doesn't seem right. Let me look at the settings. After one left, we saw that it wasn't right. We called them back in and repeated, and it didn't win the round.
No, it didn't. But I'm telling you right now, a lot of people were like, "Whoa, wait a second."
That one looks a lot better now.
It's almost identical now.
All right. So far, my experience is first test round. We're comparing left and right unknown projectors. The one on the left for the first round to me seemed oversaturated, like the colors were blending together. But it still was a better probably experience in color. The second round, we had 2 test rounds, which was very telling because one missetting changes how a projector works completely. Like we had round two. The first round 2, the right was clearly, it looked green. It wasn't anything anybody would pick right away. But after a correction was made, they were, especially detail-wise, almost the same.
So, talking about that, there were also a couple other anomalies that happened in that first round, I think. And one of them was the 295 ES, the Sony 295 ES. I don't know that this was an anomaly, but a lot of people put Sony in pretty high regard. I think it's interesting to talk about it against something in the same generation or close to, and it was the RS420. So does anybody have any takeaways on how that one went down? Because this was round 1 level matched.
Well, I would basically say that it was an equal playing field up until basically, again, like as most projectors, the dark scenes. But even the Sony still put up a pretty good fight.
It did.
I mean, that one was where people were going back and forth. It was, it was still clearly evident in one way, but it was the first time it wasn't like an immediate, like, well, that one just, because up to that point, it was such a drastic difference. It was clearly one was way better than the other. And once the Sony 295 ES versus the RS40 came up, or 420, was the first time people were like, okay, well, yes, one is better, but it's not like
night and day.
I mean,
they're in the same tier, right?
It was clearly better, but it wasn't getting slaughtered.
But basically, at that point, it wouldn't have pulled you out of the movie, right? So the other projectors immediately would have pulled you out. Like as soon as you saw the dark scene, you're like, okay, that's just completely unacceptable.
Sure.
Where the Sony is completely acceptable, and it wouldn't take you out of the movie. And I almost guarantee if you didn't have them side by side,
I think there's
no way.
Yeah, that's another huge point that I realized too. Is like a lot of times we would be looking at 2 images side by side, and I'm thinking in my brain, if I didn't have these side by side, I wouldn't know that the black levels weren't that great in that, or I wouldn't notice that, the contrast was a little bit higher over here. You know what I'm saying? I think that's something that
you wouldn't have known that there was maybe something wrong with one of the images.
Like, I mean, you're looking at a beautiful picture. It's bright, it's colorful, saturated, and you just enjoy it. So
there was that.
Kind of interesting.
Does anybody else have anything else about that one? No. So then there was the RS2100 of the NZ7 against the NX7, and this is getting more into what people wanted to see. And it was funny listening to people say, "Oh, we want to do the NX7 against the NZ7." I'm like, dude, you're doing it. You just don't know you're doing it.
Yeah.
And it was really pretty cool. I think it was nice to get objective opinions so people couldn't form bias against or for particular projectors. So
so during the bracketing,
you were here for that one, weren't you?
I was here. I can speak to that one. So I do kind of know what my own projector looks like. It's the NX7 that I brought. And I actually did have an inkling that that's what I was watching. In fact, I'm looking at my notes here and I wrote it down right afterwards, and I kind of knew. I said NX7 versus NZ7 question mark, and I kind of knew what 2 projectors I was looking at.
You even got the sides right.
At that point.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And so I'll just read you my notes, what I thought about it, and you guys can.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. Okay. So the brightness on the right, it was brighter.
Which was
the NZ7. Sorry, yes, the NZ7 was.
Did he come in when they were brightness matched or when they?
Brightness matched.
This
is brightness matched.
Okay, so very first.
We did this one twice, but this is brightness matched.
Okay.
All right, so I have blacks better on right, and then I have that there was a little more shadow detail on. I'm sorry, so blacks better on the NZ7. And then I have that there was a little more shadow detail on the NX7 on the Blade Runner scene. And that was probably just because it had an elevated black floor compared. I was able to, there was a little more shadow detail in there. And that the right had, the NZ7 had some of the whites I noticed were a little more yellower compared to the NX7 and not quite as bright, and this was in the Blade Runner. And those are just my unfiltered notes as I was watching stuff. And then I'll read you my notes if you want me to from the rematch of that, if you want me to.
Jerry may as well.
Yeah, we can talk about that one too.
Just to show you what I thought.
Now, when he's talking about rematch, he means the brightness open.
Open.
Right?
Brightness
so they
open.
weren't
Right.
level
Yeah,
matched.
okay.
No more level matching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, okay.
So now we've opened them up as you know, as good as they're going to get.
We didn't cinch down the apertures; they were just full open.
Okay.
All right. So that one. I wrote the NZ7 was brighter, and that it might have a slight blue tint to it. The NZ8, I'm sorry, the NX7 on Blade Runner had a little more of the shadow detail, just the same thing with the probably slightly elevated black floor. That the blacks were slightly better on the NZ8 and the whites were whiter. That's on Blade Runner.
NZ7?
NZ7, sorry, thanks for correcting me, it's getting confusing. And on it, I wrote that the NZ7 had blacks in the scene where you can see the creature with the eyes in the dark, and that the eyes were brighter. So it was kind of a win-win. It's blacker scene, and the eyes are brighter in the highlights. But then again, I wrote that you could see a little more of the surroundings in the NX7.
Right.
So there you go.
So not like drastic differences in some of these, and I think that's what kind of surprised us, especially when they were like level matched.
Level matched.
Lumen match, or I guess if you call it that.
Brightness match.
Brightness match. That was really tough. I mean, like really tough to determine them, especially in the bright scenes. When you get to the darker scenes.
Yeah. The bright scenes were surprisingly close.
Yeah, we're like
for a lot of people.
And we would pause it sometimes, so we could kind of like pixel peep and go.
Even then, it was.
Yeah, it's like, what am I comparing? I mean, they both are gorgeous.
I think something important to bring up, though, because I've heard it a couple times, is colors come up. And
Yeah.
Nick, I think you can talk to this, that
color
in a big part of this doesn't necessarily matter. I think a big part of that's calibration. I think it can to a certain extent, but I think it's important that people have an understanding about that.
Yeah, it was hard to kind of tell whether the color temperature difference between the projectors. Again, if I had more time, the biggest challenge for me was that I was calibrating these projectors and I didn't have a lot of time to kind of verify the calibration after I performed it. I kind of just had to calibrate it and move on to the next one, or I would never finish getting through them all. And I just kind of knew in the back of my head that this might become a problem. And for some people, they look so similar that they're like, well, I like this one more because the temperature is a little bit cooler, or I like this one more because the temperature is a little warmer.
Right.
When in reality,
you can change
the color temperature on any projector, so that shouldn't really cause one projector to win out over the other one. But there may have been some of that affecting some of people's decisions. But that was kind of because they were already so similar that they had nothing else to kind of latch on to determine
That's a good point.
choose as what made it better for them.
On top of that, too, I mean, even the color differences were minute.
Yeah, they're very small, but when you have them side by side,
Mostly
even
like
really
flesh
small
tones.
color temperature differences are
noticed that.
noticeable.
Yeah.
And something I learned, and if we did something like this again, is I would like to have the chance to, when we had the brackets and we know the matchups, before we bring everyone into the room to kind of do a last little quick by eye kind of verification or a car temperature match when they're both side by side, because they're even the smallest difference can show, kind of like if you're doing audio testing, even like 1 dB difference, you know, could cause somebody to choose one or the other.
And we actually started doing that near the very end, where we knew it was going to become almost impossible for people to choose a projector.
Yeah.
I mean, bottom line is, it played out the way we thought it was going to.
Well, for the most part.
Well, until the second half. But bottom line was the NX7 got beat out by the NZ7. The NZ8 beat out the NZ7. But once you got to the once you got to the NX, the NZs, the differences were
really minute.
Oh my gosh, it was crazy. People were like, they literally were like, these are the same projector. Like,
even when you got to the RS420,
right,
on this size screen, it was very close. I think this is a good time to talk about the anomaly. I said it like anomaly. But Tony, I'll let you take it.
Well, basically, the anomaly that we had, I guess, was basically the voting between the RS420 and the RS3100, which is a pretty big discrepancy in performance and pricing. But if you want to kind of share your opinions on that.
Mr. Note Man.
I took some notes. As the first time I came in, it was level matched, and so I'll just say what I wrote here. 3100, I gave a 7 in sharpness, and I gave the 420 a 3. Contrast, I gave the 3100 a 7, and I gave the 420 a 3. Blacks, I gave the 3100 a 6, and the 420 a 4. I said motion was the same, and then on Blade Runner, I wrote that the 3100 was slightly yellow and maybe had some dimmer whites. And I thought the 420 had a brighter white, and I wrote down possible that the dimming got a bit darker. Lucy, I thought was similar. I thought that 3100 had better blacks with dimming for sure, exclamation mark. It's kind of a dark scene kind of made things more obvious for me, and that was my takeaways.
Nice.
Well, I don't know if that was really an anomaly though, because you voted for the 3100, right?
Yeah.
I think it was an anomaly to how close. The scores don't necessarily reflect how close everything was on some of these matches. So the anomaly, I think, was that I don't know that anybody thought the RS420 was going to be that close to the 3100. Talking a bit more about color with Grant's notes, with the yellowing and the brighter blues, I mean, that goes right back to color temperature. With this one being warmer and the 3100 being warmer and the RS420 being cooler, explains a lot of that. For this one, does anybody else, so the level matchup between those two, does anybody else have any?
It was the closest thing of the whole night score-wise. Everything else was a blowout, almost universal except for like one vote.
Yeah.
And this was like 7-3.
And that could have been a sympathy vote, like, I just want to help that one out.
The Optoma got a sympathy vote, okay?
Right? You're like, really? Somebody
So,
voted for that?
we all kind of scratched our heads thinking, well, how did that happen? And we can talk. We know part of it was Mad VR put on the brightness match one. Mad VR brought the 420 up because those of us in here familiar with the RS series knows it doesn't do HDR well.
Well, the older RS series, the new ones do.
Sure, you're right. The 420, the 520, the 540 stuff like that. They're muddy. They don't process it right. So you have to have some sort of external tone mapping in order to make it work. And MadVR did it. Yeah. So it brought it to the league on a 100-inch screen with brightness matching to a position. It can have a 7-3 score against a projector that costs.
That's pretty awesome.
A lot more.
Yeah. So I mean, any type of external tone mapping, whether it be like a Panasonic projector or anything, it doesn't have to be MadVR. It's anything you want, or not projector, player. Sorry, like a UHD player or something like that. Works just fine. The MadVR was nice because Nick's laptop had it on that, and that was where a lot of the content was coming from. So it just made it really easy. So the biggest anomaly was also we're gonna pass, I think, a lot of this in the unleashing the brightness, because it was a lot of the same. Everything was expected. I actually think in the level matching one, every outcome most people we saw coming. I mean, it was who we thought was going to win was who won. But moving into the letting them go and not level matching them with brightness, there was one anomaly. That one anomaly, an even further one than the one with level matching, was again the RS420 against the 3100. And
which is the
NZ8.
8.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this one came down to Jonathan touched on tone mapping, which again is a problem here.
Mm-hmm.
The NZ8 is the brightest projector out of all these bunch, and we're
Correct.
shooting onto a 100-inch screen. At some point, you're going to pass a threshold where the projector is going to be too bright for that screen.
For that size, okay.
And at this point, we are surmising that that was the threshold, because the RS420 split hairs in voting with the NZ8. We had to do some reworks and stuff to be able to make that happen. So
and we actually redid the test.
We
right?
did.
Because
We
we
did.
were thinking like, how could it be that close?
Mm-hmm.
Something was wrong or something. So we said, let's just redo it.
Right.
And then the votes were close again.
On my notes between those two, that was yet another one of those where, honestly, most of the time, if I would be watching a movie normally, I wouldn't even be thinking about the difference. It wouldn't have taken me out of it at all between the difference of those two. It was another one of those that were perfectly acceptable for how close they were. I mean, you know, pausing it, yeah, you could see a difference. You could totally see a difference.
When you watched it in person, because I was back with the setup crew, when you watched it in person, the RS420 over here had better contrast.
It
and
did.
It's exactly what Ryan's just mentioning.
Yeah.
The 3100 was just
Looked
too
kind of
bright.
washed out almost.
Yeah,
just
it
a
was-
little bit.
It was
It's
killing
like-
it was killing the contrast
Yeah.
on itself.
Yeah.
So what did you do to solve that?
We didn't. Really
I mean,
We
did
level
we?
matched.
You'd have to lower the to
Right,
To
so
fix
you-
it, you'd
yeah,
have to.
this
tilt
is
the
one of the
lens
reasons.
on a small
Well, I don't
screen.
know. I don't know if washed out would have been a term
Well,
to
but
use
you know what I'm
because the
saying.
3100 never looked washed out.
You
The
know what I'm-
3100 lost the black floor because it was so much higher.
Right.
But
than
it
the
was still
RS420.
minuscule. But
It
that,
was.
But again, going back to what I was saying earlier, the black scenes is basically what determined most people's wins.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that the RS, well, let's just call it the NZ8, because we had it at the full bore brightness, probably raised black levels just ever so much slightly over the 420. And that was, again, people's votes were swung by the fact that in those really dark scenes, the 420 had an ever so slightly better black floor. And literally that little bit of was enough to push people's votes to which projector they preferred. Because they thought the rest of the images were so similar that they're like, okay, well, I got to make the decision based on something. And they did it based on the fact that one is ever so slightly darker.
Even if they weren't all that similar, the increase in dynamic contrast because of the lower black floor made the image on the right for the RS420, to some people's eyes, look better.
Yeah.
Even though the increased brightness on the left increased specular highlights.
True, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. Like I said, I just feel like, you know, and JVC's doing it right. They're focusing on black floor because that is
Seemed like what
that
everybody.
seems what
that was
everyone
the
cares
shot.
about.
Yeah.
And we didn't tell them to care about that.
No.
Yeah.
But back to the 100-inch screen, if we would have done this, I think on a larger screen,
Yeah.
the RS420 at some point, with tone mapping, if we didn't have tone mapping, it would have gotten stomped.
Yeah.
But with external tone mapping, if we would have gone on a larger screen, at some point the RS420 would have been too dim, and the extra lumens coming from the 3100 would have just let it run free.
Gotcha.
So because of the small screen, it equalized the playing field and actually worked to the 3100's downfall, or the
Gotcha.
NZ8's downfall.
So
Yeah.
so thinking of like in your space, I mean, could we go?
I mean-
110, 120. I mean, what do you think? Physically, you can.
Hindsight
fit
is
here?
2020. It wasn't. I mean, could we
Michael's
have?
trying to say he wants a round two. His
You
whole
want-
thing-
Not
We're gonna do this
anytime
again.
soon. No.
Next month.
No, it's one.
You were here last month. We're gonna
No,
do it
it-
again in February.
No, it's 1:30 in the morning, and Grant's got an hour drive, so we're gonna try to wrap this up in a minute. But no, this has been incredible. But I think like if we did this again
Oh,
sometime,
absolutely.
let's say next year or whatever, that's some things that we would probably want to have
next
a
time we're going to shoot
conversation.
a Christy Griffin on a 120-inch screen. That's
Okay.
what we're going to do, and light the screen on fire.
Yeah.
Now, would we
have your fire extinguishers
Would we have
ready.
done it? Would it have made sense to do them larger? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Well, we requested 120,
We
110,
did.
preferably 120. But again, they're, I don't know how much these were, $500 a piece.
MSRP, I think they're over 1,000.
Okay, so I mean, to drop $2,000 for honestly something fun. That's really what this is. These are enthusiasts. These are hobbyists. These are people that are passionate about home theater. We're trying to provide a service to, especially the AVS community, where they're really into calibration. I'm also trying to provide a service to you guys that are maybe considering, especially, either the NX7, the NZ7 8, or maybe you even got the big bills to handle the NZ9 in there. Hopefully this information kind of can help you to, I don't know, maybe formulate some opinion. And so I know we'll have a link to the discussion over on the AVS forum, because you're going to post some of the...
You're putting me on the hot seat.
I am. I'm putting in the work. But I know Jonathan's already been sharing over there, kind of your experience.
No,
on
we'll do that.
so.
Do you want to talk about the NZ series and the NX real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it went about how I thought it would. I didn't consider until Jonathan with the RS420 the brightness. I mean, I did consider it, but my brain, I guess I was so tired, just kind of omitted that.
Yeah.
And I was boggled. I mean, I had the guys voting several times. It was throwing me for a loop. That was, I think, the most mind-boggling one and the hardest to wrap our head. When we had them, we ran like 2 or 3 extra tests to try and figure out what the hell was going on.
Yeah, because we just couldn't figure out. We're like, how is that even possible that people are choosing, essentially what is now a $1,200 projector used,
Right.
versus a $15,000 brand new JVC, and
Sure.
there's, in the end, I think most people did prefer it, right? Just because of that extra little black. Until we, okay, so what ended up happening is we ran the same test twice, and I think those results came back mixed again, right?
It came back in the same layout as what happened in round 1. So it was still mixed.
Yeah.
3100 against RS420 or NZ8 against RS420. So how we mixed it is we cinched down the iris and color and lumen matched them again.
Right.
Is what we ended up doing. We toned down the 3100 to the RS42 or 420s levels and ran it again.
And then what happened?
7-3.
7-3, like the level matched ones. So it was consistent
Yeah.
in that realm, but it gave us a clear
you level
indication.
matched in the beginning and the end, and that got you your 7-3.
Yep.
So it was still level matched at the end of the
Well,
day.
was it 7 towards the 3100 or 7 towards the 420?
Well, the first one, so what ended up happening is the first one where the 3100 was all the way up and the RS420 was down, so the brightness was up. The RS421 when we ran it again. Then, when we cinched them down and allowed the 3100 to come down to the RS420, the RS4 or the NZ8 RS3100 won.
Right.
So it allowed the black floors to come down and equalize because you took the too high of luminance out of the equation. So again, and Jonathan said it earlier, and I'm going to reiterate it, a lot of these projectors would have gotten dominated if external tone mapping wasn't applied to them. I mean, the JVCs just would have walked away with it.
Yeah,
On,
gotcha.
well, the higher end
at least
JVCs.
the 420,
the newer
would
end
have
ones.
would have been wiped out way early in the competition if it wasn't for the external tone.
And the
Because it doesn't
Optoma.
have that built in.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I guess it has
It's just not good.
some level of it,
Okay. It's
not
but
that
it's
dynamic.
pretty
It's not
bad.
good. Okay.
And projectors like the Optoma were made to look way better than they would have out of the box against with external tone mapping. So that coupled with something like screen size is something that people really need to take into consideration.
Correct, and that's what I was going to say too. It's like even though on the 100-inch screen, it was kind of a toss-up between the RS420 and the 3100.
Sure.
But on the moment you get to a larger screen size,
140, 150.
the problem is it's
200.
like the RS3100 can keep lighting up a bigger and bigger screen.
Yeah.
That's going to run out of steam, and then immediately at some point it's an easy decision.
Yep.
So.
And I think what Tony said earlier about why did we get this result, this crazy result, and he's kind of surmising what people were seeing. I can tell you that that's what I was seeing. That's what my eyes were seeing. Is exactly what he said. Mm-hmm. And I had choose something because they were similar images on this size of screen.
And to reiterate, you were blind during all of this. You had no idea what was what.
And I was blind during it, and it was, and I did kind of, oh wow, okay, I see that little difference there. It's a little bit blacker there, probably because of the screen size difference, and yeah, I think a lot of people latched onto that.
Well, yeah.
So we just want to make sure that's apparent for people, and they're not basing their decisions based on something they shouldn't.
Basically, bottom line is don't go out and just buy a 420 thinking it's going to compete with 3100 if you don't have a small screen and you don't have external tone mapping.
Gotcha.
All right? That's what we're not saying go out and buy a 420 over 3100, okay?
eBay, here we come.
Because you might not get the same. You have to have a smaller screen and you have to have external tone mapping, and then you can probably feel good. You bought a 420, and it probably would have a very similar picture to a 3100 on a small screen with external tone mapping. Once we got to the NX, like near the NX7 and the NZ7, and to me the biggest surprise was how close the NX7, NZ7, and the NZ8 were.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, people sat
kind
there.
of splitting hairs.
All three of those projectors, once we got to that level, everyone basically said it'd be like buying two televisions of the same model, and it would literally within the differences of the variance of the panel.
Now the NZ8,
that's how close these were.
With the screen size, though, the increased lumens, you may be able to gain something there if the screen size went up.
Correct. Again, it's the same thing because obviously the lumens go up so the NX7. The NZ7, NZ8, they get brighter as you keep going up. So because of the 100-inch screen size, and we level matched them all, literally people could not tell a difference.
Now we did also not use the wide color filter.
Correct.
Because we didn't think
a lot of people just decided that losing 25 to 30% brightness is not worth the small, almost imperceivable color differences that people were essentially would be gaining from it. But yeah, it was pretty impressive how similar the images were.
It was
definitely a fun experiment. I mean, really, I mean, it's just one of those things where I was telling these guys, this is completely unique. Like most of us would never have a battery that is always going to overheat right when you're about to conclude this daggum video.
So before we get out of here, and I know you guys have to drive home, and I'm going to go to sleep in my own house, so it's going to be a nice long drive up to my bedroom.
That's right.
I think it's really important we talk about some differentiating factors in the NX7, because what most people are interested in is NX in the NZ series. And after the shootout, we were sitting down here and we noticed, doing some more comparisons, that the NX series, at least with the NX7, it's got some shortcomings, specifically the iris and the tone mapping. I don't know enough about it. Tony and Nick were talking about it. Jonathan, you had some stuff to say about it. So I'll let you guys.
Well, I'll just pass it on to Tony or Nick because they can talk about the dynamic iris. That was pretty clear when you showed it to us.
Yeah, so both me and Nick typically don't like any kind of dynamic iris systems or dynamic dimming. And one of the main reasons for that is because some of the artifacts that usually come up from it in one example in The Greatest Showman with Jenny Lin where she sings Never Enough, there's a scene where she comes out on stage and it it's a panned out view of the stage with her on it. With the NX series, if you're using too high of a tone mapping level and enable the dynamic iris, basically what will end up happening to her white dress is that all the detail within the dress will just kind of disappear, and it'll just turn into one white blob. And literally the detail just disappears. And in some cases, on a lot of projectors, that will even turn yellow. Not only will it make the details disappear, but the dress itself will physically turn yellow because of the gamma manipulation that got going on. So we tried out the same scene on the NZ7, NZ8. I'm happy to report that the laser dimming handles that way better. So the detail's still there. There is still a slight color shift. It kind of loses a little bit of the specular highlights, I guess. But it doesn't completely make all the details disappear, and it didn't really change it to yellow for me.
Round two, or this round, the NZ7 was on the right, and the NX7 was on the left, and the NZ7 won 7-3.
And that totally makes sense in some ways. Like what we were talking about before, like you and I were theorizing when they cattle called us into the other room to switch out, where we were talking about how like it's literally what the dimming mechanism is in those type of situations, and we were thinking about how at least on we were theorizing one was the laser because it's the black floor for one, that would be the laser, and then it's the shadow detail for another. But the tricky part is whether or not it's that elevated black floor that makes you perceive the fact that whether or not you're seeing the more shadow detail because of it. But in the end, that slight uptick in the brightness is what got that 7 versus the 3, I think, for a lot of people with that black floor in conjunction. And the fact, though, that it was a 7.3 at all, that we saw all day long, anything that even saw, like a split decision of any kind where you saw, like 2 or 3 votes on one side and a few on the other, that means they were pretty dang close in those situations.
At least on a 100-inch screen.
At least on a 100-inch screen. That's always the qualifier.
Yeah, so another qualifier that we need to put out here is that all of these scenes were done using MadVR. So these are the best case scenarios for all of these projectors.
Yeah.
If we would have allowed them some of this content without MadVR doing tone mapping, it would have been an absolute disaster for some of them because they wouldn't have been able to keep up.
Helping the cheaper
Yes,
projectors.
it is significantly helping the cheaper projectors keep up.
Right. We didn't see any real yellowing or terrible color shift.
Gotcha.
With the dimming, it's a substantial improvement over the Iris of the previous generation.
Yeah. Cool. But there's still artifacts. I mean, you still lose some of the like I said, some of the highlights. Now it's a trade-off. So if you want better blacks, anything that's
fade to black even.
Fade to black. Jonathan's basically said he's went through about 30 hours worth.
Oh, not exactly on that, but I've switched it back and forth a lot. And I have 50
I think
hours.
you said 30 hours.
He's measured it. I've got about 50 hours on the projector, and I've gone back and forth a lot. And I prefer laser dimming on mode 1, so it's not a universal turn it off.
Sure.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the key is you need to play with the settings. You need to learn what your projector does, and figure out what works best for you, your size screen, your viewing habits, and even your preferences.
Mm-hmm. And just know it's still not perfect. But at least for both Nick and I, we both agree that it is an improvement over the dynamic iris of the old NX series.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even use the iris on the NX, but the laser dimming, I could absolutely watch a movie with that. It doesn't distract me or draw me out of the movie in any way. I mean, I still hope that they can make some improvements to it, but it's still a lot better.
And the dynamic tone mapping, when we were comparing them A to B, on some of those clips seemed a little bit better, a little bit maybe enhanced or upgraded on the NZ series.
It just had a better. I'm not exactly sure what was causing that. It just seemed like it was a little bit more detailed. The way it handled colors, doing the conversion of colors, was probably better on the NZ series.
Perhaps
than it was.
a little less bloom, and that might have been dynamic iris related.
That could have been potentially dynamic iris related, but for some reason things didn't get as smooth. Like certain facial, you could still see a lot of the pores and things like that in people's faces without losing. In direct comparisons, you could most definitely tell one was losing some detail, and the NZ series was quite a bit better. Obviously, it still was no match. Personally, for me, it was no match for MadVR external tone mapping, but it's still a step up. And I don't know. It doesn't sound like JVC made any improvements, but whatever. For some reason, it still looks better to me.
I'd agree.
Mm-hmm. Cool deal, man. Anything else, guys? This has been a fun day. I mean, it's been an
exhausting day.
I mean, we've been going from 6 a.m. It's now almost 2 a.m.
Been going for almost 20 hours.
Yeah. So it's been a long day. But I just want to say, just from a home theater enthusiast, thank you, seriously. This is just, these guys are truly passionate. I mean, I didn't bring any money to pay y'all to do this. You're not.
What?
I believe it.
You owe me for an NZ8.
We'll see. But there's a ton of work that goes into something like this, and I know that it's easy to look on the outside looking in and kind of pick apart flaws or how we would do it differently. We've already discussed if we do this next year again, we're probably going to do some things differently, and hopefully
There'll
each
be
time,
a lot of things done differently.
yeah, hopefully, you know, those things will just continue to provide value to you, and just give you some additional information so that you can make the best decision, what works best for you. So, man, Ryan, thanks for opening up your home to a bunch of crazy nuts like us to just kind of invade it, and even put holes in your ceiling to hang stuff like this. And feed us and everything, and all the calibration that Jonathan and Nick and Tony have done, man. That's just, it's been awesome though. And the fellowship, the camaraderie, man. Brian and Grant and all these other guys, man. Even had a random dude, man, email me today. He's like, "Hey, I'm right near you. You think I could come hang out with you guys?" I'm like, "We're going out to lunch. Meet us there," because I didn't want him to like be some stalker dude or what. You never know, man. But he was super cool, man, and so he even came over and we just got.
Ryan, did you know about this?
No.
No. Hey, they told me it was okay to bring them.
It's a reincarnation of people taking over my own home, like we did on the last crawl where I'm kicked out of my own theater. For
Yeah, it happens. It happens, man. So the cool thing, guys, is I'm excited because we've already had some conversation. There is such a huge group of home theater enthusiasts here in Kansas City that I could definitely come up here another time in the future. Not in 3 weeks, Tony. We ain't doing that. It's gonna be a while. But maybe
I'm not sure I'm coming back with you.
We're on a double twice in just over a month. We got to keep this going.
Yeah, well, no, but maybe like in 2 or 3.
I think we restarted a spark in your group.
Yeah, literally, like maybe in 2 or 3 months.
Because you guys were doing nothing until we came and did the tour, and all of a sudden, COVID.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Yeah, but all of a sudden you guys are like gung ho now. You're like,
yeah, well, they're excited, and I think hopefully what some of this does is generate some excitement in the hobby, in the theater space, and I don't know, man. It's been cool. It really has been a fun journey. But where I'm going with that is that y'all have a lot of home theaters up here, and so maybe in the near future, maybe a couple months or whatever down the road, I can make another trip up here and hit some of the other home theaters that haven't been featured here on the channel. So with that, guys, like I said, it's about 2 in the morning. We're going to wrap it up. I think our voices are shot. Hopefully you've gotten some value out of this and you've enjoyed the content. And I guess we'll just wrap it up there. Hope you guys have a blessed week, and we'll catch you in the next video.